Hi. Everybody hear me all right? Excellent. Hi, my name is Matthew Roberts, and I'm a member of the Instructional Design for E-Learning group here at Grand Valley. On behalf of my colleagues from across the university, I'd like to welcome you to the 2014-2015 Teaching and Learning with Technology Symposium. It's a mouthful. A special welcome to any guests who might have been here for this morning's Michigan Blackboard User Group meeting and decided to stick around. We are glad to have you. We look forward to this event all year. It really is the biggest thing that we do, and a lot of planning goes into it, but definitely a lot of help makes this event possible. So I'd like to extend some thanks today to Christine Renner in the Pew Faculty Teaching and Learning Center and their staff, to my colleagues and our graduate assistants in the Information Technology Department's e-learning group, also to the Pew Campus AV staff who somehow show up and magically make all this happen. I don't know how they do it, but we can't do this without them. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors for today, Blackboard, TechSmith, Ensemble Video, and Lenovo. More importantly, though, I have the honor of introducing today's keynote speaker. Derek Bruff is no stranger to Grand Valley, having spoken at the 5th Annual Scholarship of Teaching and Learning Academy in 2013, and apparently he makes a regular trip to West Michigan, it sounds like, back many years. This is apparently his second home or something. So
it's getting that way, yeah.
He's the director of the Vanderbilt University Center for Teaching and a senior lecturer in the Department of Mathematics there. He holds a PhD in mathematics from Vanderbilt University, but I think he's far more broadly known for his prolific blogging, tweeting, speaking, and writing on a number of topics in educational technology and pedagogy. His book, Teaching with Classroom Response Systems, is one of our raffle prizes today. I still need to get you to sign that. It increases the value. In what little free time he manages to find, I don't know how he does it, Derek is an amateur photographer. He enjoys exploring recipes from Family Circle magazine and playing exotic board games with his family. When we think instructional technology, I know that I certainly, and I think a lot of people do, first of all, think about hybrid and online courses. Derek, in his talk today entitled Class Time Reconsidered, Using Technology to Support Student Learning, is going to focus on how technology can be used to make traditional classroom time more valuable and more focused on student learning. So join me in welcoming Derek Bruff.
Thanks, Matt. All right. Let the magic happen. Magic did not happen. There we go. Magic takes a second. Thank you for that welcome, Matt. I'm very glad to be here. This is, I think, my 4th year in a row to come to this part of Michigan and interact with faculty, and I've grown to like it here a lot. At some point, I will have to visit in the summer, which I understand is a different kind of vibe. So a little bit of kind of contact info first. So there's my name, Derek Bruff, also my website there, derekbruff.org. I have already put the visuals from this presentation up there, so if you go to derekbruff.org and click on presentations, you'll see I'm using a software called Prezi today, and you'll see the Prezi right there. Feel free to follow along now or just jot a note and reference it later. As we go, you'll see some links and references, and so if you want to follow up on any of the examples that I'm sharing today, you'll be able to do that just by clicking through the live version of the presentation. I am also pretty active on Twitter, @DerekBruff is my handle. Feel free to tweet during the talk today. Just try to say nice things. The hashtag for today's event is #TLTS, Teaching and Learning with Technology Symposium 15. So if you can add that to your tweets, we can find them more easily, and you can find each other on Twitter. With that, I don't want to say too much more about me because I am kind of interested to know more about you. And so what I would like to do is to have you pair up here and brainstorm some answers to this question. 3 to 5 technologies you have used or seen used in teaching contexts. I like to ask this question at the beginning of my talks to get a sense of kind of who's in the audience and what their experiences are. And instead of just having you guys all kind of chat at the same time, what I would like you to do is actually to use some technology here. And so, applause already, yeah. So this is a platform called Poll Everywhere. It's a classroom response system. It can do many of the things that clickers can do, although I like to use it when I'm on the road because I don't have any hardware to bring. So what this requires is in your small group, right, groups of 2 or 3, I want you to answer this question, but then I want someone in your group to report your answer. And you have a couple of options for doing that. One is to go to pollev.com/Derek Bruff right here. And then you should see this question right there, and you can just type your answers in. So if you have a smartphone or a tablet or laptop, you can kind of access it that way. If you don't have any of those, you can just use plain old text messaging. So you want to use this as your to. That's who you're sending the text message to, 37607. It's a short number, but it's a number. And then the body of your text message, you're going to want to have this code, 95502, and then space, and then whatever your response is. So just type in your response to this question. All right, so you have 2 different ways to respond. Again, I'd like you to partner up, introduce yourself if you haven't done so already, generate a list of technologies, and submit them via Poll Everywhere. Go.
That's cool.
Good to see you. All right, I can see that 25 of you have responded so far. I think I've got it set up where you can submit multiple responses. That's fine. It's all going in the same pot. If you would take another 30 seconds or so and go ahead and submit your response to this question if you haven't done so already. Carry on. All right, let's see what you have. So there's different ways you can have Poll Everywhere display the results. I like to use a word cloud for this type of question. So the visualization trick here is that the more frequently, so this has taken all of your responses, decompose them into individual words, which is slightly problematic, but generally works for this type of question, and then kind of plotted them all out here. The larger, the bigger the font size, the more frequently that word was included among your responses. Okay, so it gives us a kind of quick way to analyze a lot of textual data. And so, not surprisingly, given the morning, right, Blackboard right there front and center as the most common response. I'm also seeing PowerPoint. I see Prezi, that's nice. Of course, I did just mention it. Prezi has one Z, just to let you know. Let's see, we've got Camtasia, which is, I think, out in, wait, it keeps moving around. This is live, hold on, I'm gonna have to stop this poll for now, just to freeze. What else am I seeing here? Camtasia, Ensemble, clickers, right? Thank you for that, it was very nice. I'm glad you mentioned that, one of my favorites. YouTube, video, just board, I don't know, that's probably a part 2 of a 2-part answer. Usually board has some type of modifier in front of it. Google, all right. Everywhere, probably to go along with poll. There's a little poll. That's what we're using right now. Socrative, which is a similar kind of system. Docs, maybe with Google in front of it. Again, there's a little limitation when you decompose things into words and not phrases. But it does give us some patterns here. I'm not surprised by the big words. I typically see a course management system when I go somewhere and ask this question. I typically see PowerPoint and Google and YouTube, sometimes clickers, sometimes not. I think it's also interesting to see what are some of the smaller words, right? The ones that only 1 or 2 of you mentioned. So I'm seeing, let's see, Screencast-O-Matic up there. Swivel, I saw an abstract about that. I don't know what Swivel is. I look forward to finding that out. Ditto Max, I'm not quite sure what that is. Is that a Ditto machine?
Copy machine.
Copy machine, all right. I've seen dittos. Let's see, what else? Poplet, Airplay, Storify. Yep, I'm actually going to mention that a little bit later. All right, all kinds of things out there. A pen, that's kind of exciting. Clap, but I don't know what all of these mean. All right, streamed, iClickers, Pinterest. Oh, we got a little Pinterest, and Scantron, excellent. Okay, all right, so that gives me a little sense of kind of what's in the room. I will say, when I do this at Vanderbilt, we have this kind of cluster of digital humanities folks, and they always talk about GitHub a lot. So there's no GitHub up here, but that's okay. So let's go back to this. I would like to share my favorite educational technology. That would be wheels on chairs. All right. So, and I say this for a couple of reasons. One, because it's true. Like, if I had one thing to pick for a classroom, it would probably be wheels on chairs, because I think my approach to using technology is that it should be responsive to the kinds of pedagogy and teaching practices that you want to implement in a given course, in a given class session, in a given classroom. And so the more flexible and responsive the classroom is, the more you can do, right? You guys are all pretty well situated. I can't move these chairs around very easily at all in this room. But if I'm in a classroom and can move chairs around, we can have small groups, we can have large groups, we can have debates, we can have fish bowls, we can do lots of different things in that same space if we have flexible furniture. And so I think that's important to remember. Now, most of the technologies you mentioned, I don't know what the modifier for board was. It could have been chalk, right? But most of the technologies you mentioned were digital technologies. And honestly, that's kind of where we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk mostly about digital technology today, not analog technology like wheels on chairs. Because in some ways, digital is kind of where we're figuring things out, right? And so it's helpful to think collectively about how we can use digital technology. But I also want to reinforce that we have technology that we're used to using. We have technology that's non-digital, and that's important too, all right? I am a big fan of wheels on chairs. Now, the main thing I want to talk about today is this idea of a flipped classroom, right? So this has been in all the news in the past couple of years. That's not what a flipped classroom means. And this isn't either. So one of my favorite Twitter personalities, the EdTech Hulk, tweeted, "Hulk flipped classroom once, university not happy about structural damage to building." Picture that with a Hulk voice, all right? That's not what the flipped classroom is either, but it's certainly something that's been in the higher education news a lot in the past couple of years. And so let me give my definition of what a flipped classroom is. You can pick your own definition, but this is the one that I'm going to use here for the next 45 minutes or so as we kind of think through this. So it's nice to contrast this with something that's often called the traditional approach. So the idea is that, imagine kind of your traditional intro physics course, all right? And I'm actually borrowing language here from physics professor Eric Mazur. And so that, if you think of that setting, right, you've got this model where the transfer of information happens during class, right, typically through lecture, right? Information flows from instructor to students. And then after class, the students assimilate that. They make sense of that information somehow, usually through problem sets and things like that. So the flipped approach, the flipped approach says, let's shift that around a little bit, right? Let's take that transfer step and let's move it before class so that during class, we can have more time available for the assimilation step. And the rationale really is that of these two steps, the assimilation step is the harder step, right? It's the more challenging step. And so why don't we do that when we're all in the same place at the same time, right? Students and instructors, so that students can interact with each other and can help each other out. Instructors can be there to provide feedback and structure for that assimilation process. That seems like a better use of class time than transferring information, particularly given how many options we now have to do that transfer outside of class. So that's kind of the essence of the flipped classroom. Now, I like to change the terminology a little bit. I like to talk about first exposure as what happens before class. And then during class, assimilation sounds a bit like the Borg. So let's call that practice and feedback, all right? We know that to learn, you have to have practice and feedback. And so why not make some room in class to make that happen? Now, I'll also point out that I think there's another step, right? We're not just done, right? Hey, they come to class, they got some first exposure to the material, they've got some practice, they've got some feedback, check, right? It's usually harder than that. So there's a need for some form of further exploration after class, all right? And so this is what I think of as the flipped approach. And you know, flipped is one term for it. It's kind of a time shifting more than a flip-flopping, right? But I think this is helpful to think through. So let me share a couple of examples here to make this slightly more concrete. So I'll start in my own class. This is a statistics course. I'll mention it a couple of times here today. And so before class, what I typically have my students do is read a section in the textbook, and I will post some questions for them to respond to, not only to guide their reading, but also to hold them somewhat accountable for their reading. And so here it says, here's your next reading assignment, read section 2.3, omitting this subsection for now, and answer these following questions by 8 a.m. Right? And so the idea is that the students read their textbook, I've given them a little direction, they've started to think about some of the material, and then we come to class and do the practice and feedback. Now, I'm a big fan of using clickers. I'm going to share a couple of ways to use clickers today. And so this might be a clicker question that I ask my students, asking them to apply some of the ideas that they learned, or kind of saw, I would say. I don't know that they learned them quite yet before class, but to take those ideas during class and do something with them, right? To try to apply them to solve some problems. And I use some kind of guided structures around that, so they get that practice and feedback during class. And then after class, this is small intention. This is just a problem set. This is the same kind of problem set that I've always been giving my students, right? This is a typical post-class problem set in a math course. And so that further exploration is needed, right? They still need that time to continue to make sense of the material and maybe tackle even harder questions. Let me give another example from a very different kind of class. This is from Mark Sample, who teaches English. He's now at Davidson College. And he was teaching a course on, it was a sci-fi course. And so one of the before class assignments he gave his students was to live tweet their viewing of the movie Blade Runner. All right, so they needed to watch the movie for class. They could watch it anytime during the week using whatever resources that were made available to them. But as they did it, they were asked to live tweet their observations and to use a hashtag so that those tweets were easy to find. And so a few of these, Forrest writes, he's trying to prove that he's not a replicant by trying to fall in love, develop emotions, even though he knows he is. It's debatable. Brian Coe says, I really love this detective private eye style narration, and it's interesting how the setting reminds me of the one in Neuromancer, making a connection to another work that they had studied. And then Will writes, anytime somebody hunts you in their underwear, you know they mean business. So, not entirely serious, but that's okay, right? The idea was that the students had this first exposure to the material before class. They watched the movie. There's a way to kind of hold them accountable for that, right? And a structure for helping them make sense of the movie as they encounter it for the first time through this Twitter assignment. Then during class, what did Mark Sample do? Well, he collected their tweets, and he used a tool called Storify to group them, to kind of collect them in one place, and then group them by theme. And so this is just the start of the Storify. It scrolls on for quite some time. So the first theme was the variants of Blade Runner, the different versions of the movies, right? So there were all these tweets on different themes. He used that Storify, that collection, as a launching point for class discussion that day, right? So the students had the first exposure before class, and now they're going deeper, doing the kind of analysis that he wants them to do with the movie, using their before class observations to kind of jumpstart that process. And then after class, then he has different types of assignments that he has his students do. He calls them investigations. He assigns more traditional research papers sometimes multimodal, multimedia projects, right? As they kind of take what they've learned from Blade Runner and maybe roll it up with some other films and texts that they've read. Now, a couple of different examples from a couple of different disciplines. I'll point out that what Mark Sample did used technology in some pretty clever ways, I think. But having students watch a film or read a book before class and then coming to class to discuss it, right? That's standard operating procedure in English classes, all right? The flipped classroom is not a new idea, right? It is a relatively new term. I'll say more about that in a second here, right? But I like to joke that if you flipped your traditional English class, you would have students come to class and read a novel silently and then talk about it after class, right? Online or something, right? You don't want to flip that, right? Now, the term is fairly new. So the earliest references that I've found are a couple. There's this classroom flip paper, a conference paper that came out in 2000 using web course management tools to become the guide by the side. Same year, we have in the Journal of Economic Education, Inverting the Classroom, a gateway to creating inclusive learning environments. And honestly, when I first heard this term, it was inverted classrooms for the early 2000s. And certainly in the math world, that's kind of the term that we were using until the flipped classroom term came into vogue a few years ago. And I blame or credit this guy, Sal Khan. He's a big fan of the flipped classroom idea, using pre-class videos as part of this, right? And so I think that's one reason why this term, flipped classroom, has gotten so much traction lately. I have another theory as to why this term has gotten so much attention. I think there's something about this flipped classroom idea where you take the lecture that used to happen during class and you shift it before class. For most faculty who do any kind of lecturing whatsoever, which is a lot of faculty, they kind of have to have a response to this idea, right? The fact that you can video a lecture and put it online, and it's a very similar experience to actually being there in class. I think most faculty are finding themselves either excited by that possibility, right? I don't have to spend class time lecturing anymore. I can put that online, and now we can do something more active during class. Some faculty are a little scared by that possibility. If I'm not going to lecture during class, what am I going to do with those 50 minutes, right? This is what I do. I'm a professor. I profess. I lecture, right? And so I think this is one of the reasons this term, this idea has really struck a chord in higher education, because you can't not respond to this challenge, right? And I think on some level, right, the fact that there are so many high-quality lecture videos from a variety of sources available for free online now puts a little competitive pressure on institutions of higher education to do something different with their class time, right? That no longer is that class time necessarily there for lecture, right? Students can get that in other ways. So I think there is some pressure here. And that leads me to the question at the heart of the flipped classroom. And whether you flip or you don't flip, I think you need to think about this question. And this is what I want us to talk about today. How can we make the most of the relatively limited time we have with our students during class? At Vanderbilt, right, if I'm on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, each of those class sessions is 50 minutes long. If it's Tuesday, Thursday, I've got 2 sessions at 75 minutes each. I have 150 minutes a week with my students where we're in the same place at the same time. That's pretty limited time, right? How can I make the most of that time? And I'll add kind of a secondary question, given the theme of this symposium, how can we use technology to enhance that process, either before class, during class, or after class? And that's what I want to talk about today, is how can we use technology to kind of guide those first exposure experiences, to strengthen the practice and feedback that students get, and even to connect with the further exploration that needs to happen. So let's talk a little bit about first exposure. Again, I like this term better than the transfer stage. It's actually from Walvard and Anderson's book on effective grading. They use the term first exposure, which I think is a nice way to think about this. I've got this image here. This is actually at my daughter's elementary school of their playground, right? Like there's some steps, right? But that's not the end of it, right? They're going to go up to that platform and then slide around and do all kinds of fun stuff. But you have to get up there first, right? So what is the right kind of first exposure for students? Well, I got to give credit to your math department here. They produce some of the most effectively designed and delivered screencast videos that I've seen. And so this is just a screen cap of one of those videos. Again, thanks in part to Sal Khan, there's this idea that the flipped classroom involves pre-class videos. It doesn't have to, but we now have tools to make pre-class explanatory videos pretty easily, actually. A lot of people can do this. And you can make really good ones. And so this is certainly one option where technology can help us enhance that first exposure that students get before class. I myself am a fan of the textbook, right? I've been flipping my class for 10 years now by having my students read their textbook before class, just like those crazy English professors do, right? That is also a way to do first exposure if you do it well. Now, I want to give you, I want to have you get your Pull Everywhere devices back out again, because I want you to kind of experience a little something here. So just for the next 5 or 10 minutes, I'm going to have you be students in my statistics class, all right? So I have a question for you. This is a question I always ask when I teach this course. It's at the start of the unit on probability. The question is this: your sister calls to say she's having twins. Which of the following is more likely? Assume she's not having identical twins. Is it more likely that she's having twin boys, twin girls, one boy and one girl, or are all three of those options equally likely? Now, what I'd like you to do is to get back in your small groups, talk this out, put your heads together. I'll put up Poll Everywhere. You'll have the ability to respond, all right? And I want you to think this through and answer to the best of your ability. Mathematicians in the room, just be silent, all right? All right? You're thinking about this like I am, but that's okay, all right? Go. All right, go ahead and respond. If you only have one device per group, just respond on behalf of your group. If you all have devices, you can all answer. This is not an actual classroom. We'll be a little loosey-goosey with this.
Will this be on the test?
There's a test. If you're using the text message response, this one's a little bit different because it's a multiple choice question and not a free response question. You still send your text message to that same 5-digit short code, But now the text message itself would just be one of these 4 numbers corresponding to your response, right? Or like I said, you can go to pollev.com/DerekBruff and just click your answer right there. All right. Everyone in? Up to 34 responses. That's pretty close. Let's see where you guys are. All right. Big fans of the all 3 are equally likely, although 1 boy and 1 girl has some supporters, as do the twin boys and twin girls answers. Interesting. I will say, just a little tip here, I did not show you this bar graph as you were discussing, right? This is actually a live bar graph. If someone answers now, they'll change. I find that tends to kind of prejudice students, right? They kind of wait to see how their peers answer before they weigh in. I'd rather have everyone think independently for a little bit when tackling this type of question. All right. Yeah. So I'm not going to do what I usually do at this point. So what I usually do at this point is we do a little simulation. Actually, no, it's too much fun. Can I do that? Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. So what I would like you to do is to get out a coin or something you can flip. All right. Coins work best, but you know, I don't know. Pen. Flipping coins is what we're after here. I do this with my students sometimes, and they don't have any change on them. I'm like, take your clicker and flip that. I don't know. There's an app for that. Yes. Download a coin flipping app if you don't have any coins. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to, yeah, we'll do it this way. I want you to flip the coin twice. But before you do, I want you to designate one side as boy and one side as girl. All right? And so I want you to flip it twice. Right? This is simulating having twins. It is nothing like the actual process of having twins. All right? We are just doing a mathematical simulation here. All right? So flip the coin twice and take note. Did you get 2 boys, 2 girls, or did you get 1 of each? All right? So go. And then we'll do a show of hands here. We'll do a show of hands for this. I'll reset. I'll reset. Here's what I would like you to do, all right? So ignore the last option for this. We're just going to use the same voting mechanism, all right? What I want you to do now is to just ignore the question as well. Just report your twins, all right? You just had twins. Congratulations. Did you get twin boys, did you get twin girls, or did you get 1 of each, all right? I just want you to report your data at this point, and we'll see if we see any trends, all right? Keep them coming. We need data. We need lots of data at this point. The more data, the better. It's fascinating. A lot of girls this year. It's good. It's good. Math, right? Like, my daughter is in 1st grade. The entire 1st grade class at her elementary school is 2-to-1 boys to girls. I don't know that I don't know how that happened. As a mathematician, I am assuming that we have 2 choices here, boy and girl, and that they are equally likely, which is why the coin flip simulator approximates reality here. As your data are coming in, now how many of you still think all 3 of these are equally likely? Right? We've got a lot more boy-girl combos than we do the other 2 possibilities, right? Now, why is that, right? Well, you had a 50-50 chance for the first twin, boy or girl. You had a 50-50 chance for the second twin, boy or girl, right? So you have 4 equally likely outcomes. Boy, 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 girl, girl, boy, girl, girl. 2 of those outcomes involve 1 boy and 1 girl. So there's a 50% chance when you run the simulation you'll get a boy and a girl, right? A 25% chance of twin boys and a 25% chance of twin girls, all right? And that's kind of how it works. Now, so thank you for your data. It was not a perfect 25, 25, 20, 50 split, but it was pretty good, right? I think persuasive, right, that one of these is more likely to occur than the other. Now, why am I sharing this question? Okay, you can stop being math students now and go back to being teachers, okay? Some of you are like, whew, okay, made it through that. So in my statistics class, right, when we get to the section on probability, I need my students to confront a misconception that they have. And it's one based on experience, right? They roll dice when they play board games. They select cards at random when they're playing poker, right? They have this misconception that when you have some kind of experiment, that all outcomes are equally likely, right? And that's not always the case, right? In this case, we do have equally likely outcomes. We've got these 4 equally likely outcomes, but 2 of them are grouped together as what we call an event in probability, right? And that events are not equally likely. And I need to disrupt this notion, that this misconception that my students have very early on, or the entire section of probability will not make any sense to them, right? So this is the very first thing we do in our section on probability. Now, there's an idea here that I think is worth knowing about from the literature called times for telling. This was a term introduced by Schwartz and Bransford. This is a picture of Diet Coke and Mentos. Have you seen these experiments, right? You put some Mentos breath mints in Diet Coke and you get this geyser of Coke. It's pretty exciting. I did this several years ago at my daughter's preschool on Science Day. All the parents were asked to come in and do sciencey things. And I was the cool dad that brought in the exploding Coke, right? It was pretty awesome. It was pretty awesome. Even with 5-year-olds, after you do this demonstration, they ask why it works, right? Now imagine college freshmen and you're in a chemistry or a physics class, right? Option 1 is you give a 15-minute lecture on the physics and chemistry behind exploding Diet Coke and Mentos. And then you do the demo, right? Option 2 is do the demo, ask students to hypothesize why it works, maybe talk about it, maybe vote on some possible reasons, right? And then provide that explanation. Which of those is probably going to work better, right? Well, certainly the second option will be more exciting, right? This time for telling idea works in a couple of ways, right? If you start with the demo and have them try to figure out why it works and maybe even get stuck and not get good answers, they're going to want to know what the actual answer is. So there's this motivational piece to it. But they're also going to be more cognitively ready to understand that explanation because they've already been thinking and hypothesizing, right? They've activated everything they already know about this, and then you're going to help them kind of resolve this thing that they don't understand. And so that clicker question with the twins, right, that was the whole point of that, right? I wanted you guys to kind of get to the point where you wanted an explanation, right? And the simulation serves to show, hey, the answer that we thought was the right answer was not right. What is the right answer, right? So I try to use this to create this time for telling. One more example of this. So this was a study that came out in 2013 looking at a series of kind of neuroscience topics. And they had students split into 2 groups. Group A encountered some readings and videos on this particular neuroscience topic first, and then they did some hands-on activities using some simulations to try to kind of play with the ideas. Group B did it the opposite way. They played first, and then they saw some explanations. And when they tested these students afterwards, Group B did a lot better, all right? And so what this calls into the question, I think, is this idea that the first step in the learning sequence is an explanation, right? It can be sometimes, but I think other times students need to kind of grapple with ideas. They need to kind of get in the middle of something, get stuck perhaps, and then bring that explanation. So when it comes to the idea of first exposure, the first exposure might not be a lecture or a video or an explanation, all right? It might need to be something else. So, sorry, a little back and forth here. I hope you're not getting seasick. I'm gonna try to pause here. If you move through a Prezi too fast, bad things happen. Okay, so a couple of key principles here. One, this idea that the first exposure might not be an explanation. It might not be a video, it might not be a reading. It may need to be something more active that students encounter, right? And maybe even needs to happen in class. That's what I was going to say one more time. All of this was done by students operating in isolation in this study, right? This study has no recommendations for what needs to happen during class or together with other students or on their own. It was just a sequencing study, all right? So the kind of when and where did this happen is different. A couple of key principles here. One is this idea of mental models. So as you're thinking about a first exposure for your students for a particular topic, you need to confront whatever existing mental models they have, right? So my metaphor here is being in London. I took this photo when I was in London a couple of years ago, right? So in London, they drive on the left side of the road, right? In the US, we drive on the right side of the road. As a pedestrian in London, that's a dangerous place to be, right? Because I'm always like, I don't know where to look, right? The oncoming traffic is not where I expected. So they have these really nice little signs that direct you where you need to be, all right? My mental model of how traffic works, there's nothing really wrong with it. It just doesn't work in that setting, right? I've got to kind of find a new mental model that will help me understand what's going on. And so we need to be conscious of the mental models our students bring. And then we also need to have this idea of scaffolding, right? So when you build scaffolding, you build the first level, you stand on that to build the second level, you stand on that to build the next level, right? What's the sequence that's going to get students somewhere useful, right? As you think about these first exposure activities, what's going to get them ready for that next encounter? Now, a few quick ideas on the next encounter, okay? The practice and feedback section. So here's this little guy. I love this Flickr image. It's called Little Shredder, right? Here's this guy. He's going to presumably learn how to roller skate, right? He's going to get on his skateboard, not roller skate. He's on a skateboard, right? He's going to fall down a lot, right? Every time he falls down, his body is going to get feedback on what worked and what didn't, and will presumably get a little bit better at riding a skateboard, right? Now, every skateboarder I've ever seen falls down a lot. I think it's just part of the sport is falling down. But at any rate, he's going to get better, and he's got this helmet, right? He's got the knee pads. He's got a safe environment, or as safe as it can be, to do that practice and feedback. That's true for physical skills, right? We need that practice and feedback. It's also true for cognitive skills as well. So a couple of ways to use technology to enhance that practice and feedback piece. So here's what I usually do with clickers. So this is what's called peer instruction. Pose the question, students answer independently. I skip that step with you guys. Then I look at the results. If most of them answer correctly, hey, they kind of got it. We can have a brief discussion, but move on. If most of them answer incorrectly, right, if 90% of the students have it wrong, you don't want to have them pair up and talk about it. That's not going to go anywhere. You need to backtrack, cover something differently. I'm usually aiming for this point, where students are split between a couple of wrong answers, right? Then I have them talk about it, revote, and move to a class-wide discussion. I skipped that step with you guys as well today. But this process is a really nice way to use clickers or classroom response systems to augment small group and large group conversations in class and help students dig through material together. You can do lots of different kinds of clicker questions. The one that I asked you was a little more conceptual. You can do more application questions. This is from an astronomy class. You're kind of saying where are these constellations going to be 24 hours from now, right? So they have to apply what they know about Earth and constellation relative position. Critical thinking questions. This is from a colleague at Vanderbilt, kind of a diagnostic question. Here's what we know about this patient, right? What's the most helpful study to do next to get more information? Not necessarily a right answer to this question, but it's a nice kind of diagnostic question to get students thinking about what they would do in this situation. This is one of my favorites. Rob McDougall, that's not him, that's just his Twitter profile. He calls them counterfactual questions, right? If a Viking and a samurai fought, who would win? I don't know. That never happened, right? To our knowledge, Vikings and samurais never actually fought each other. So there's not a factual right answer to this. But imagine having a whole class discussion based around this question, right? Where students have to kind of think, what do I know about technology and warfare and culture, and how would those two things interact on this particular setting? The idea here is, with using a classroom response system, right, we get a couple of things. One is everyone gets to respond, right? And I actually want everyone to respond. So there's some kind of accountability and invitation for everyone to participate. It's just a show of hands. It's really easy to bow out of that process, right? And then we also get the bar graph, which allows us to kind of teach responsively based on what students are actually thinking. A couple of different ideas, again, for using technology to enhance this process. The stats course I taught a couple years ago, I added this data visualization piece. So I wanted students to brainstorm some ways to visualize complex data sets. I had them pair up, doodle some things, and I said, get out your cell phones, take a photo, email it to me. Right? And then I brought up a whole bunch of photos on the big screen so that we could kind of go through them together. Right? Again, trying to get their ideas up in front of us so that we can all kind of decide, well, what works about this? What doesn't work about this? That was a segue into a later term activity where students designed infographics in this course. And so this is one of the student design infographics. And so to get them ready for that big assignment at the end of the semester where they applied some statistics to a particular problem and created this data visualization, we had this Google Doc activity. So I wanted them to help me write the rubric that I would use to evaluate their work on these infographics. So I gave them some sample infographics to look at and figure out what are the qualities of a good infographic, right? What are the different aspects of this work that we should be looking at, and what's kind of poor quality, acceptable quality, good quality. And so I had them get out their laptops and all contribute to a shared Google Doc at the same time. It was very exciting. If you've ever seen like 50 people contribute to the same Google Doc at the same time, there's all these cursors flying around. It's a little crazy. But lots of fun. And so each row on this Google Doc corresponds to a contribution by a student group trying to kind of parse out what are the qualities of effective data visualization in this kind of setting. So again, I'm kind of skirting through examples quickly, but I've got links to all of them if you want to kind of read more about any particular example. A couple of principles that are at play here. One is this idea of formative assessment, all right? This is an X-ray image of a laptop, all right? If you want to know what's inside your laptop, you've got to make some effort to get in there, right? X-ray it, screwdriver, hammer, something, right? You've got to kind of look inside and see what's happening. In a similar way, we don't really know what our students are thinking and what they've learned and what they haven't learned, right? All we can do is ask them to give us stuff, right? And then we try to infer what they're understanding, what they're not understanding based on what they do. All of those examples that I just showed you involve making more visible what students are learning, right? How are they thinking? What are their wrong answers, right? What are their rationales? And the technology can help make that more visible. And then we can act on that, right? We can give them the feedback they need. We can kind of guide the whole class based on what we learn. The other principle, and I referred to this with the clickers, is this idea of all skate. So, I don't know, if you grew up when I did in the 80s and 90s and you went to the roller skate rink, right? I would do this in middle school. It was not my favorite thing to do, but this is where everyone was. So I went to the roller skate rink. I was terrible at roller skating. But the DJ would come on and he'd say things like, it's now time for couples skate. Right? And so you would, if you had a date, right? That was never me. But if you had a date, you would then skate romantically, I guess, right? I was on the carpet waiting around, right? And then he would say things like, it's now time for the hokey pokey. And so if you had the skills to do the hokey pokey and roller skates, you could roller skate out to the middle of the rink and do your hokey pokey and turn yourself around, right? Again, I did not have that kind of skating skill, so I was on the carpet, right? But then the DJ would say something like, it's all skate. And that meant that everyone was invited to participate. You didn't have to have a date. You didn't have to have skills. All you had to have were roller skates on your feet, all right? And you could get out on the floor and participate. And that's what I love about technology in the classroom, is that it often can be a way to have an all-skate moment, to say to your students, no, I don't, like, I'm not just going to ask a question and have the same 3 people respond to this. No, I want all of you to think about this. I want all of you to submit an answer, and I want to look at all of those answers in some fashion. Right? Technology can help us do that and create these all-skate moments in our classroom. Few ideas on further exploration. All right, this is my little spiral metaphor, right? The learning never ends, right? But we just keep doing more and more with it. Twitter and bird watching. My all-time favorite use of Twitter in teaching. Tweets about tweeters, right? So Margaret Rubega teaches at the University of Connecticut. She's a biologist, she's an ornithologist. She teaches an ornithology class, study of birds. She wants her students to realize that the fascinating things about bird biology aren't just for these exotic birds they see on National Geographic specials around the world, right? That actually in Connecticut, there are birds doing really interesting things. And so one of her assignments is to have students tweet about the birds they see. As they're going to campus, as they're going to work, as they're living their lives, pull out a phone, tweet an observation, right? Connect it to class material. A few of these. Saw a heron flying over Fenton River. Its large wings provide low wing loading for its body size. Good for flight. Hashtag bird class. Morbid, but saw a dead bird in my barn today. I'm guessing all the feather lice had already left. Probably not her first response to seeing a dead bird in her barn, but who knows. And then this guy actually got a photo of an albino red-tailed hawk and tweeted it. How cool is that, right? The point is that the goal is to take what they're learning in class and actually apply it, to transfer it outside of class, right? And this works really well. The technology is like the right thing for it, right? It's short, it's in your pocket, you can do it when you're out and about, It's the right technology for this type of application. A couple of more examples. Digital stories, right? So having students create this kind of multimedia content. I'm not going to play much of this, but this is from
this January
course
will celebrate the
Vanderbilt.
50th anniversary of an important speech.
And this
assignment involved using archival news footage as well as more recent news footage, video that students created to kind of to make an essay, right? To make an argument using multimedia content.
administration.
Local histories. I love this. Do you know what ghost signs are? These are these signs on the side of buildings for businesses that have long since gone out of business, but the signs are still there, right, as advertising, often on brick buildings. And so this was Larry Cibula. He had his students actually go around and photograph ghost signs and then research the history of those companies, right? And so they needed some technology, right? You got to take the photos. They put everything on Flickr so they could share it more broadly, right? So folks in the region could learn more about these companies that are no longer there. I thought that was really clever. One more quick example. This is from Cynthia Cyrus, who teaches in our School of Music at Vanderbilt. She, as a class project, had her class write a new entry for Wikipedia, right? So this was one of the pieces that Brahms wrote that really had very little information on Wikipedia. And so they spent about 3 or 4 weeks in class going through this whole process, figuring out what do we know about this piece, what can we write about it on Wikipedia, how do we write things on Wikipedia both technically and kind of in terms of format. Really nice example. It's a nice Wikipedia article right now, right? And that was a class project. A couple of key principles as you think about using technology for this further exploration. One is this idea of authentic audience. So I took this picture in Boston a couple of years ago. Here's this dude, right, street performer having fun, right? Look at these audience members, right? These guys, those are my favorite, those two ladies right there, right? Over there. He was doing all kinds of cool things, right? Now, our students aren't street performers. Well, some of them may be, but that's not the point. This guy is connecting with an audience, right? That's why he's doing what he's doing. It provides not only his financial income, but kind of the motivation for what he's doing. And we can use technology to help our students connect with real audiences, authentic audiences, often outside of the course itself. This is something that technology is really good at. The other idea that I think is really key here, there's this principle of transfer, right? So these are all pictures of photographers doing their work, right? I actually took all of these. I'm an amateur photographer, as Matt noted. I was in all of these locations, right? I have my camera. I have my meager knowledge of photography and how to use my camera and light and composition and all that kind of stuff. When I'm in a new environment, I like to see what I can do with that, right? I take what I know and I transfer it to the situation at hand to try to make interesting images, just like these folks are doing. And that's the kind of dynamic we want our students to develop, right? That's what we want them to do when they leave us, is to be able to take what they've learned and solve new problems. So I've got one more Poll Everywhere interaction for you, and we'll use this as kind of a wrap up. So again, this is what we call the traditional model, right? First exposure during class, practice and feedback, and further exploration after class. This projector screen is gigantic. I love this. Sorry. I don't usually get to interact with these pictures like this. So this is what we've been calling the flipped class model, right? Do the first exposure before class. During class, we have the practice and feedback, and further exploration happens after. Once I set up this little diagram, I'm like, I got to keep shifting, right? Can we take things over one more level? Well, yes. We can have all of that happen before class and do the further exploration in class. That can work too, right? So traditional, flipped. This might be a studio model, right? There are some disciplines like art, design, architecture, right? They're not so big on the lectures and the practice, right? They have students work on projects during class. I've seen humanities classes that work that way as well, right? Where the further exploration is done collaboratively during class time together. So here's what I want you to do. Again, talk about this in your small groups, and I'll let you vote on Poll Everywhere. I want you to think about something you teach, a topic or a module, all right? And given these ideas that I've shared in terms of structuring and timing, but also tools that you might use, what's one thing you might take away from this that you would do, and which of these 3 approaches kind of fits? For that topic, for that module, what would make the best use of the class time? Which of these phases? All right, so take a minute, talk about that, and vote when you're ready. Go. You're saying, how do you respond on behalf of your group?
Yes, I'll respond to that.
That's what you respond, right? All right, go ahead. If you respond, we won't have much time for a
Report out, because I know we've got some other things to do here. But I am kind of curious, as you think about kind of applying this to your own situation, which of these three is kind of something that you'd like to try out in your teaching? All right, let's see a few more answers here. Are you ready for the reveal? We only have 14 responses. Folks are 15. All right, getting a little better. All right. So I guess I'll leave you with this, right? There's no right answer to this question, right? This is what I love about clicker questions that don't have right answers, right? We're expecting multiple choice questions to have right answers. This is not a question that has a right answer. But it's a question that we need to be thinking about, right? Again, we've got 150 minutes, give or take, with our students every week. What's the right kind of process? What's the right kind of structure using before class time, after class time, so we really make the most of that precious time that we have together? And are there ways that technology can help in any of that? You don't have to use technology, again, right? Wheels on chairs. I get a lot of mileage out of chalkboards and big Post-it notes in my class. But there are ways that technology can kind of play very strategic roles in enhancing any of these three approaches. So I think that's all I have for you. Yeah. Thank you for your time and attention this afternoon. I hope this has been interesting.